So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to Gish with Vish number 3. Incredible fail, because that just kind of sums up the life of Dwayne T. Gish, is just incredible fail. I am of course joined as usual by the Vish part of Gish with Vish. Vishanti, how are you? Fair enough. That's fair enough.
Quacking and snacking.
All right. I don't have a snack, but I do have some water to which I've added caffeine, basically.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, it's been a morning. I spent way longer this morning tweaking a lightning simulation than I ever thought I would do in my life. It took a while. But anyway.
Listen, when it comes to spending too long hyper-focusing on small details, I'm your huckleberry. Because
Yeah.
I was reading an email from someone earlier today, and I was thinking, yeah, I'll just read for a little while before I get out of bed. And it was one of those, I can't sleep, someone's wrong on the internet things. So I got out of bed at like 9 a.m., which is extremely unusual for me on a Saturday, and logged in and started like furiously typing a response.
Nice. All right, well, we're gonna jump in pretty soon. We're not doing the drinking rules today, mostly because at 3 I will be over on Chesh's channel, where I will have a couple rum and cokes or so. That also means that if you're looking forward to the post-show watch party over on my channel, or sorry, on my Discord, that's not happening this time. Sorry about that. However, I do want to note that the Sal Bitchmade timer is still currently on hiatus while we try to get as much of Benthoven's car repair paid for as possible. Now, it is currently at 1,962, which is just crazy, you guys. Thank you so much for all the support. If you would like to support more, please go ahead. It is linked at the top. I will remind you a few more times during the show. If you can't afford it, or you've already given as much as you think you can, or as much as you want to, please don't feel like you have to give again. I'm just reminding in case anyone who hasn't donated wants to, they'll know where to go. I believe that this fundraiser will stay up for probably until like Wednesday or something. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, so please.
Anybody who wants to know where the Sal Bitchmade timer is, it's currently sitting at just over 96 days.
Yeah. So, by the way, if you want to see the repair bill, both the estimate is now available. We can show that to you if you want. And the actual final bill will be made available after, it arrives, which it has not yet, obviously. So,
Shout out my sister in the chat.
Oh, hey, Vishanti's sister is here.
What?
All right. Well, so in case you guys don't know what the format of the show is, we are currently looking at a Dwayne T. Gish talk about the fossil record and why it's a challenge for evolution for some reason. Now, you might be wondering, Dapper, why are you and Vishanti looking at a decades-old creationist talk? And that's a good question.
He's the OG.
Yeah. Well, first, he is basically the OG, right? I mean, I guess technically Ellen G. White is the OG, but like,
I don't think we have video of her.
Not only do we not have video of her, no one outside the Seventh-day Adventists really care about Ellen G. White.
Yeah.
It's just them. Now, there are a few good reasons, though. One is, it's interesting to see just how little about creationism has changed. And two, it's also interesting to see how many gaps in scientific knowledge that have been closed in the last few decades he wants to stick God into. And it's one of those things, because I want to both look at just how little creationism has updated in the past decades, because creationism doesn't care about data. They don't adapt to data unless they absolutely have to. And two, I want to show why the God of the gaps is a really bad argument, because those gaps close, and then what's your God left doing? So,
yeah, and it's just one of those things where young Earth creationism can only ever accommodate data. It can't ever predict anything. Yeah. So,
Jake Nelson says, I can't afford to help Ben pay until payday Wednesday, but totally can then. make sure this lasts until then. I will let him know. And also, you might want to like reach out on the Discord or something, because since you're both in the same Discord, which is mine, you can DM him to make sure that he leaves it up a little bit longer. All right, but with that, Vishanti, are you ready to dive
Kennedy
in?
in Space just made a really good point. Conspiracy theories, like creationism, never changed their starting position.
Absolutely
Correct.
true. Yep. Which actually, Dead Kennedy in Space has been on the channel before.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
is doing really good work on rocket videos and NASA history. It's pretty great.
So, yeah. In fact, actually, you have been on the channel before, so we're gonna add you as a moderator there.
Fancy upgrades. Whoop whoop.
Yep. I don't know why you didn't have a wrench before. Maybe I just wasn't streaming enough. Anyway, feel free to put a link to your channel if you want there, Dead Kennedy. Anyway, we are going to hit play unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, but you got a member chat.
I did. Too Young to Feel This Old has been a member for 11 months and is at the Sauropsid level and says, Dapper Sessile Tunicate versus Vishanti and Pelagic Tunicate. Who will win? I mean, obviously, it's the side with the 2-meter tall theropod.
No, it's obviously the pelagic tunicates because they're mobile. We can adapt.
What are they going to do? Squirt water at me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll still just, be a 2-meter tall theropod.
Be stuck to a rock.
No. Only my Sessile Tunicate allies are stuck to a rock. I'm not.
Oh.
Yeah. Neither are you.
Yeah, we'll squirt water. Gosh. Squirting all the water at you.
I still think I would win. All right. Are we ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
And so we have the invertebrate evolving into the vertebrate.
Yes. One of the things that I think does not come across very well in a lot of lay descriptions of like biology, and to be fair, this is not a creationist thing, right? This is just a general thing, is that all invertebrates are not more closely related to each other than they are vertebrates, right? There are many invertebrates that are more closely related to vertebrates than they are to other invertebrates. So, for instance, acorn worms are more closely related to vertebrates than either is to, say, starfish. But starfish, or sea stars if you like, are also more closely related to vertebrates than they are to, say, mollusks. And mollusks are more closely related to vertebrates than they are to, say, sea anemones. So, it's not like there's this...
It's starfish. Is it starfish or sea stars? Neither. It's Patrick.
Well, yeah, Patrick. I would say most people probably know the group as starfish, but there is an effort among science communicators to try to go with sea stars in an effort to make sure that people don't think of them as fish, because they're definitely not fish in any sense. Now, Pelagic Tunicate Truth Official, who's been a member for 3 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, Pelagic Tunicate loves Dapper, although Dapper don't. You know what? They're allowed to like me. It's fair. I'm a pretty great theropod, but they're also gross and weird. And abominations.
Just so tunicatist of you.
Yeah. Also, the South Geek Unofficial makes a very good point for €5. The rest of my super chat money for this week goes to Bent. Do hit like thou. I think it means though. Do hit like though, everybody, to avoid the Bilbo. Yeah, the Bilbo is coming up pretty soon unless we get more. Yeah. Which actually means yes, we actually have had a update. And later on, we're going to go over and read a few messages over on the actual GoFundMe. So,
sweet.
Yeah, let's hear a bit more of Mr. Gish.
100 million years. Billions times billions times billions of the intermediate should have been produced. Our museum should have millions and millions and millions of fossils of the transition form showing.
Yeah, so there's a few things. One is soft-bodied organisms are less likely to leave fossils at all, obviously. Second, we do have transitional forms, right? Not only do we have transitional forms in the fossil record, we have them alive today. So I mentioned the acorn worm earlier, right? That's a hemichordate. It's almost a chordate. And then we have things like lanceolets, which are very, very fish-like, but they're not vertebrates even. They don't even really have nostrils. But if you look at their tails, they look a lot like fish tails, and they have a post-anal tail, they have a notochord, and then you can get things like hagfish and lamprey that don't even have jaws. They don't really have skeletons, except maybe kind of cartilaginous skeletons. They're barely vertebrates in that they kind of have a spine, but it's cartilaginous and very, very simple.
Notochord.
Oh, they definitely have a notochord. So, like,
Yay, I learned some biology.
yeah, so like we've got transitional species alive today. We don't even need to look in the fossil record to find transitions between vertebrates and invertebrates. And basically, to get from like a lamprey to a modern bony fish, you need to turn some of those gill arches into jaws, and you got to calcify some of the cartilage, and that's about it.
What if you turn it into multiple jaws?
Then you get a moray eel.
Excellent.
Yeah. Carrie Bronson for $5 says, Pelagius used
I think he
water
means
gun.
pelagic.
Oh, okay.
Pelagic.
Okay. Pelagic used water gun. It's not very effective. Cecil used harden. It's super effective. Interestingly enough, sessile pelagic tunicates are often thought of as having an exoskeleton because the cellulose outer covering that they cover themselves in is actually quite stiff and provides a lot of the structural support that they use to keep themselves upright. Sessile tunicates, if I remember correctly, have a less strong outer coating because they need to be relatively flexible to continue to, propel themselves through the water. So if I remember correctly, they have less of an exoskeleton than tunicates do. Well, sessile tunicates.
Subscribe to Dapper Dinosaur where you'll learn more about tunicates than you ever thought possible.
Mm-hmm. Did you know that their hearts are two-way? They spend a few minutes pumping one way, and then they reverse direction and pump the other way for a few minutes, and then do it again?
I believe I do remember that, yes.
It's pretty cool. All right, here we go.
What invertebrate evolved into a fish and the course of that evolution?
I mean, so this is a problem where in the fossil record, even if we find the direct ancestor, like let's say it's Hycoichthyes, right? Like let's say Pikaia directly evolved into Hycoichthyes, which directly evolved into the first, like agnathan placoderms, which then directly evolved into, gnathostomes, which then have directly evolved it. Like, let's just say that that's the case. How would we know? Even if you found the actual fossils of the direct ancestors, you couldn't really know, which is why when you do an evolutionary analysis, unless you have like very recent, and I mean very recent, like and very conclusive genetic data, you always put species that you find in the fossil record at the end of their own branch, even if maybe they're actually the direct ancestors. So we could say, well, Hycoichthyes is morphologically consistent with what we would expect for the common ancestor of all vertebrates, right? Okay, that's cool. But is it? I don't know. Probably not, because it was probably one amongst many very similar species. But it still shouldn't exist unless this evolutionary transition occurred. So when someone asks, well, where is the ancestor for this thing? They are either strawmanning evolution and paleontology, or they just don't understand the basics of either of those sciences. I don't know which is the case with Dwayne Gish.
I just had a pinky in the brain moment where my brain went on about 3 different tangents and now I've circled around to something that's making me laugh.
Oh.
So the chat got me thinking because they're quoting eel jokes, but they're doing it in the style of like, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. And then I thought, oh man, but that was Frank Sinatra, really. But then Tony Bennett came to mind because he just passed yesterday. So now I'm like, you know what? I feel like we need to have another musical stream. We did so well with the crabs last week. They're doing really great moray eel jokes. Like, you've got the when an eel bites your eye like a great pizza pie. That's a moray.
Mm-hmm.
And there's when your jaws open wide, and there's more jaws inside. That's a moray.
That one's really good. I really like that one. That is excellent. Man. Who
So
knew that
good.
my chat was so, just linguistically talented?
Me. I knew.
It's true, you did. And I found out. I didn't even
You
have
did?
to F around first. All right, here we go.
As a matter of fact, they don't even have one. Not even one fossil of a transitional form between the invertebrate and the fish.
It's true. We don't have one. We have thousands.
We have lots.
Yeah, thousands. And the thing is, some of these were known at the time, right? Like, Pikaia has been known for decades, and I think Hyquicthes has been too. Like, so we've had these for a very long time. Mr. Gish here
Sorry,
could have
call me
looked
Ro.
in, but here's one of the things about Dwayne Gish, right? Dwayne Gish was known to be corrected to his face with experimental evidence in real time, admit to having made a mistake, then go to a new venue, and then continue to repeat the same thing that he now knows is wrong.
Speaking of mistakes, I made one.
Uh-oh.
Apparently it was Dean Martin up Frank Sinatra. Thank you very much, Hads. And Call Me Row notes, when an eel bites your thigh and you bleed out and die, that's a moray.
You know, morays aren't that vicious.
I know, but it's funny and it rhymes.
They're basically like sea puppers or something. Like, there's so many...
They just come out from behind a rock and just open and close their mouth a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't look like something small enough that it could catch and, like, eat in a couple bites, you're gonna have to be a pretty big dick to a moray to get it to attack you, really.
Yeah.
They don't want to take on some big old ape that's underwater for some reason.
Yeah, no.
It's not on their to-do list.
It's gonna be like, why is this ape underwater? Ah!
Yeah. But I missed... Oh, right. So I want to tell the little anecdote about Dwayne Gish, right? So,
yeah.
You might be familiar with Eugenie Scott, the president, I think, of the Center for Science Education.
The evolutionist,
Right.
Eugenie Scott.
Now, that organization, I don't know if she was involved in this in particular, but I think she was. But, like, don't quote me on that. But that organization at one point had an event with Dwayne Gish. And he likes to talk about the bombardier beetle. And his version of the bombardier beetle is, I mean, badly wrong, right? Like, he says that when you have the hydroquinone and the hydroperoxide together, they explosively react unless there is an inhibitor present. And that the beetle makes the inhibitor, and then it releases, like, some kind of enzyme that breaks down the inhibitor in order to cause the violent reaction. Which, okay, interesting. It turns out that's not what happens, actually. What actually happens is that the enzyme in question is actually increasing the rate of the reaction between hydrogen quinone and hydrogen peroxide. Because normally, while those two do react exothermically, they do so at an absurdly slow rate, right? So the people from the CSE, the Center for Science Education, they come out in, like, protective gear with, like, a plexiglass shield and, like, some beakers. And they've got, like, okay, we've got hydroquinone and we've got hydrogen peroxide. Everyone stand back. We've got safety goggles and big rubber gloves and whatnot. And they mix the two chemicals together in front of Dwayne Gish, right? And all that happens is that it turns into a kind of smelly, brown, warm liquid. That's it. That's the whole thing.
Wow.
And so Dwayne Gish is all, like, hems and haws, and like, well, you know, I guess I must have read this wrong, or maybe the source I got this from was wrong, and I don't remember where that was. Okay, I guess I was wrong about that. Like, a week later in a new venue, he was continuing with his classic description. Wrong. Now he knows it's wrong, because he's been shown it to his face. And he's just continuing the same description of how the bombardier beetle works. So the thing is...
Gotta lie to yuck.
Yep. So I do not believe that, you know, Dwayne Gish has a particularly firm grasp on how science or evolutionary biology works. But I also know that he was, in fact, a definite liar.
Yeah, and even if he does know how it works, he doesn't care.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
So...
Alex Markle says, does Gish do his signature gallop in this video? Not really, because in order to do a Gish gallop, you kind of have to be in a discussion with someone else. Because the point of the Gish gallop is that you change topics so many times that your opponent, and bring up so many things that are nonsense, that your opponent can't possibly have time in his allotted, you know, speaking period to address everything that you've brought up. So
yeah, typically a Gish gallop is a debate tactic.
Yeah. So if it's a solo video where there's no opponent, then it's kind of impossible to do a Gish gallop. Because, you know, there's no opponent that you're trying to bamboozle by just bringing up 18 million things.
Yeah. And then it takes them, 8 times longer to refute one of the points you made when you spat like 15 at them.
I like Jillian Wren. When you've got an eel and it's making you squeal, that's a moray. Very nice. All right, here we go.
Every major kind of fish that we know anything about.
What's a major kind of fish?
What's a major kind of fish?
This reminds me of John Morris Pendleton's Major Kinds of Birds. Do you remember that? He's like,
Yes.
we've got the birds that can't fly, like the penguin. We've got the birds that fly, but not very well. Then we've got the birds that fly pretty good, and eagles. It's just like,
It's like, dude, nobody's using these categories. What are you talking about?
maybe that's what Dwayne Gish means. We've got the fish that don't really swim, like I don't know, like flounders or something. Then we've got the fish that swim okay, like a mola. Then we've got the fish that swim really well, like sharks. And then we've got tuna. Oh, okay.
No, you need to understand, fish that don't swim are bees.
Oh, that's a good point. Thanks, California.
You're welcome.
Jeez. That's how that did not get appealed and overturned, I do not know. Although I appreciate it because it did give bees extra protection, so...
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, people were amused more than they were trying to be technical, and they were like, yeah, it protects the bees, so we don't really care.
Yeah. Alright, here we go.
Appears fully formed right at the start without a trace of an ancestor.
How does something appear partially formed in the fossil record? This is something that I could never wrap my brain around. What do they think that even means?
So that's one of the things.
Like, I know that there's the crocoduck meme, but what does partially formed even mean?
Yeah, so I don't know. The only thing that it comes to my mind is like a slightly melted version of an animal. Like if you had like a wax statue of a fish and you melted it just a little bit, maybe that's what a partially formed fish would look like. Or maybe it's like, it still
so
kind of looks like a fetus a little bit, maybe. Which is basically just what fish fry are, right? Because when fish...
Yes.
When fish hatch, they're at a stage in development that in other vertebrates would still be embryonic.
Yeah.
Let's see. Carrie
but
Bronson...
it's also this melted face emoji. Like, does that think that's what's happening?
Yeah, that's what I think of when I think of partially formed. It's like, oh, partially formed
partially
fish.
Formed.
Yeah, it's just what would happen. Oh yeah, Origami Swami
No,
says it would be the blobfish. Yeah. Carrie Bronson for $5.
It's like, I'm imagining an abomination baby saying, "Kill me." It's like Brundlefly at the end.
It's one of the Ripley clones from from Alien Cubed. Just lying on the bed. Kill me.
Kill me.
Until Sigourney Weaver just flamethrowers it.
Yeah.
Carrie Bronson for $5 says, Dr. Dan's sniper method is a good countermeasure against asymmetrical BS problem that underlies Gishian tactical doctrine. Yeah, it is. One of the things that Dr. Dan likes to do, which is different from me, but it's also a good tactic, is he likes to find like the one thing that is most devastating to a particular argument, point that out, and just be like, none of the rest of it matters. Which he's right about most of the time. Whereas I like to go into absurd amounts of detail about every last reason that it's wrong and you're dumb, actually. Which I think is also a good tactic, but for different reasons. And I think it's like, both of those have their place, and I'm glad that both of those tactics exist.
I
didn't mean Alien Resurrection,
because I knew what you meant, but yeah, Alien Cubed, yeah. I actually unironically like Alien Resurrection, but I probably like it for different reasons than people think that I do.
For me, it's kind of like a comedy.
Well, yeah.
Because it's just
obviously
so
it's a comedy. It's supposed to be funny. It's absurd. It is schlock.
Plus, it's got Ron Perlman.
It does have Ron Perlman, and it has Brad Dourif in it. How can you not like Brad Dourif?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and remember, when it comes to Ron Perlman, there's more than one way to lose a house.
He is correct about that.
Yes.
Also, you gotta give major props to Sigourney Weaver nailing that backwards over the shoulder like nothing but net swoosh on the first take.
Yeah.
Like, just throws it, switches it.
Yeah, that wasn't special effects. That was just her first take of that shot.
No, that was her. Yeah, that was just her being a badass.
Tiktaalik Rosie for 20 Vietnamese dong says, a partially formed species is the Tiktaalik.
It's a Tiktaalik.
Yes. And I love that Tiktaalik Rosie has Andrew Snelling's face with the long nose photoshopped over Tiktaalik. This is perfect.
We're so many memes deep.
I know.
Great.
All right, here we go.
In my many debates, I have challenged my evolutionary opponents with these major facts. I said, please explain to this audience how you could have 100 million years of evolution, during which time some invertebrate evolves into a fish, and yet not leave a trace.
Go for it.
Well, genetics and the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Not every creature that's ever lived has been fossilized.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's
I don't know how else to explain that to creationists. Like that. This is one of those things that they just don't seem to be able to process. Of all the millions, potentially billions, of animal species and plant species that have ever lived, we only have a very tiny percentage that have survived in the fossil record. It doesn't mean that there aren't transitional forms anywhere. It means that we may not find all of them. Yeah. And even if we don't, we still have evidence for invertebrates developing into vertebrates.
And even if a species has been preserved, that's no guarantee that humans will find it.
Yeah.
Because we know that there are species that humans have not found, because we know that the rate of new fossil taxa being described is still very, very high, which means there's still a lot of currently unknown species left in the fossil record to be found. Otherwise, we would...
there's this weird thing where Earth is very dynamic and the landscape is constantly changing and weather impacts things. There's volcanoes, earthquakes. Stuff like that tends to, mess with your nice little pristine fossil record.
Plus, of course, like he said correctly, these are soft-body organisms we're looking at, and they are much less likely to preserve. In fact, one of the things is, sharks, right? They don't have... In fact,
I do know sharks. Not personally.
The only real hard part of their bodies is their teeth. Which is one of the reasons why, for most fossil shark species, all we have is their teeth.
All we find is their teeth. Yeah.
Body fossils of sharks are vanishingly rare. They exist, but they're very hard to find. Now, does that mean that those shark teeth...
nuance.
Yeah. So I guess maybe by Gish's standards, those teeth were actually independent living organisms. They didn't actually have a shark body attached to it, because we don't have any evidence of a shark body, right? So...
Or, in Kent Hovind's parlance, just because you find a fossil in the dirt doesn't mean you know where it died. You know where it ended up, and you don't know that it had babies, much less babies that were any different.
Yeah, that is a thing he says.
That is a thing he says.
It's very dumb. But you know what? This isn't Kent with Bent, so we're going to go on with Gish.
Okay.
I have always been met with thunderous silence.
I don't
That's
believe
a lie.
You. That's just a lie.
I don't believe it. Yeah.
Say not a word. They offer no explanation. They don't even try to answer the challenge, because you see they have no answer.
That's not correct.
See, here's the thing.
They have an answer and you don't like it.
One of the things about Dwayne Gish, right, is all of his talks and debates were done pre-internet, when people couldn't just look up his previous debates, right? If you didn't go to a debate or somehow get your hand on a recorded VHS, which there were not very many recordings taken, there was really no way for you to check on his claim that, oh, none of my opponents have ever answered this question. Because the thing is...
you just have to take his word for it.
Yeah, but the thing is, those opponents claim otherwise. And you can't just go check the debate. So it just becomes a he said, she said. Which is one of the things I like about the current age of, the internet, where we don't have to just rely on, some guy said this. It's we can just check the debate. Yeah. Debates now are just archived indefinitely for public consumption, which is great. So.
There is no answer. It is not physically possible to have 100 million years of evolution. And producing billions times billions of intermediate forms and not leaving trace. It's just not possible.
But it is.
It is, but also that isn't what happened. Because again, we do have the transitional forms. So, yeah, wrong about everything there. It's always fun.
I've seen some.
Yeah.
In the museum in LA.
Yeah, we saw some.
What are you talking about? We did.
Yeah.
I took photos.
Yep.
Dinosaurs had feathers. I've seen it.
Yeah, you actually saw the actual feather impressions on a fossil
Mhm.
slab right there in front of you. And it's just
Right
like,
there in front of my own eyes.
well,
Yeah.
I guess it's true. It's hard to deny that dinosaurs had feathers when there's a dinosaur skeleton right in front of you.
There's a
And
dinosaur with
there's
feathers, yeah.
fossils with feathers, yeah. Meldeborn,
Mm.
who's been a member for 10 months and is at the sauropsid level, says, despite the fact that most animals didn't fossilize, there are still too many fossils for Noah's flood to be real, despite any protestations by Gish and other
Yeah.
creationists, which is, it's also a
Yeah.
big problem. We talked about it.
That's also not the biggest of their problems.
Well,
I would venture to say the biggest of their problems is the heat problem, but
I would agree. But yeah, also if all the fossils, if just the actual fossils that we have were all alive at once, like we said last time, like the Earth would just be covered feet deep with like animal bodies across the
Mhm.
entire surface, and the entire ocean would just be a single sludge of algae. It's complete nonsense, and that's just the ones that are alive.
tectonics doesn't exist. What is subduction?
Scott Duke says, "Is Gish's hair real? Don't seem natural." I don't know.
It might just be a lot of product. That was a very
Yeah.
common hairstyle.
Yeah, look, it could be a toupee, it could be just a lot of product. I don't know. It's certainly not the way he woke up in the morning. But I'm also I'm not going to give him flack for, doing his hair in the morning.
And Alan Bird also notes who's going to disagree with Gish in a room full of rabid creationists. And it's not even that they're rabid creationists, it's just that they're Christians. And if you're giving a speech in what looks to be a church, people probably aren't going to be like, well, actually, science says, because they're going to be like, that's atheism.
Well, okay. That depends on which group of Christians we're
his group of Christians are frequently the type that say, well, that's just atheist science and materialism.
Yeah, I just do want to be clear that there are a lot of Christians out there who, well, first of all, probably wouldn't think to have a science discussion in their church as a church function because that would be weird, but who, if going to such a science function, would be very much open to actual science and very much not a big fan of this kind of pseudoscience. I know, because I know many Christians like that.
Yeah.
Including some who are regular guests on the channel.
True. A coyote notes Gish's hair is intelligently designed.
It is, actually. That's true. Yep.
Oh.
All right. Now, it has... We got to the half-hour mark, so I want to read some of the messages here on the fundraiser. So let me switch over to a different set real quick. Let me just make sure I have the opening animation off. So here we go. So first I want to open up this guy right here because this is amazing. Javad Khosrow for $50 says, I've heard that a certain top-hatted biped with an open acetabulum had a bad breakup with a pelagic tunicate and is now rebounding with a benthic tunicate. I was unable to confirm or debunk this. And we've got the amazing meme here where my head has been is replacing this guy, and then we've got the sessile tunicates over here. Friendship with pelagic tunicate. Friendship ended with pelagic tunicate. Now benthic tunicate is my best friend with these pelagic tunicates all crossed out. It is absolutely perfect in every way.
Art.
It's great. I love it.
Oh, this is amazing.
Also, we have a couple more messages. For $100, Anonymous Pie says, Ceratosaurus can't drive. That's true. We can't. It's one of the reasons why it's an important thing to get this car fixed. And then Royland Hutchins for $5 says, I like watching Kent with Ben. Well, thank you. I do too. So I just wanted to make sure that those got in there. And so now it is time for more Dwayne Gish.
You see, that really settles the matter of the fossil record. We really don't have to talk about Archaeopteryx or any of these other things because we've already settled the matter.
You kind of do, though, because, okay, let's just say that there were
we don't even need to talk about Archaeopteryx.
Right. So let's just say that there were absolutely no transitional fossils between vertebrates and invertebrates, which isn't true, but let's just say it were. And let's just say that we would expect there to be many, 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 even though that's not a safe assumption. All that would mean is, okay, well, you have a problem with evolution basically at like the subphylum level. Okay, cool. But that would still mean that if we have, say, transitional fossils within vertebrata, that probably indicates universal ancestry, common ancestry for vertebrates, right? So that would still mean that humans are related to not just chimpanzees, but to goldfish and sharks and dinosaurs. So one of the problems is you can deny universal common ancestry, but that doesn't get rid of the lower levels of common ancestry. And it's one of the things that I've talked to some creationists before about, where I'm like, your argument doesn't actually get rid of like the humans and chimpanzees are related, right? Because you disagree with that.
Yeah.
You think that these two organisms, which are almost genetically identical and which are morphologically extremely similar, have no common ancestry. But your argument against it is like, well, I don't see how, a fish and a clam could share common ancestry. I'm like, okay, but like, you see how even if you're right about that, it doesn't change anything about, say, humans and chimpanzees, which you very literally religiously reject. And that's one of the problems here.
You really have a large hurdle to scale explaining why humans are essentially just hairless apes.
Mm-hmm. And actually, there are like anti-evolution types who are okay with like wider common ancestry, like Michael Behe, who's the big irreducible complexity guy, right?
Oh yeah.
In his book, he leaves open. He's like, yeah, I'm okay with humans sharing common ancestry with other mammals. Yeah, humans and giraffes might have a common ancestor. Yeah, because he is at least smart enough to know that if you were to be able to counter common ancestry for, say, all life, or for all animals, or for between the phyla, that does not negate the evidence for common ancestry lower than that.
Yeah.
So no, Dwayne, you do still have to deal with things like Archaeopteryx and other transitional fossils, because even if there were a complete lack of transitional fossils from vertebrates to invertebrates, which there isn't, and even if such fossils would have to exist if such animals had ever existed, which they don't, it still wouldn't do anything to negate those other types of common ancestry. So, yeah. And this is one of those examples where I'm like, I want you to note how little creationism has been able to progress in the last, 40 years or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still making these same arguments, and they're still just as fallacious. And yeah, because even if their arguments were true, it still wouldn't lead to the conclusion, well, I guess we can just toss out all of evolutionary biology. But all right, here we go.
Evolution has not taken place on this earth.
Well, that's dumb.
But you see, there is much other evidence from the fossil record.
Ooh. Hey, look. He's just showing a really bad cartoon of Tiktaalik. And he's probably going to say, well, this thing has never been found. It does look like a shark.
Oh my gosh. It's like Jeff the land shark, but with like little flipper fins instead of actual like land shark feet.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
it's
man.
Jeff!
The thing is, you can tell that this is something that he had his artists dream up because it looks absurd,
so
right?
Bad. It does.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like when actual, real scientists actually try to come up with hypothetical transitional forms, and then we find the actual transitional species, they're a lot closer to being right. But then Dwayne Gish is here like, make up some kind of crazy whale shark fish amphibian. Just do that, artists. Make sure you put volcanoes in the background, because that's how we know it's the long, long ago.
That's how we know it's ancient, yeah.
Exactly. Because, one, obviously there are no active volcanoes today. Clearly.
There's in Popocatépetl.
And all of the volcanoes were all active in the ancient past. That's how it works.
Yes, at the same time,
Yes.
preferably.
It's true. They were all erupting constantly, all the time, all of them. Until humans came along, and they were just like, all right, the humans are here. Shut up, guys. Time to go dormant. That's how volcanoes work.
Again, stairs in Popocatépetl.
Evolutionists believe, in the course of time, that some fish evolved into an amphibian that we may...
Tiktaalik Rosie for 20,000 Vietnamese dong says, my god, they're Tiktaalik. Nice.
My god, they're Tiktaalik. Great.
made the transition from water to land. They're not sure why that took place.
Yeah, they kind of are, though, because there were both resources and safety on land. Because you can remember, up until this point, the biggest thing on land was basically, like, largish scorpions. And by largish, I mean, like, largish by modern standards, right?
Are we talking the size of, like, a house cat? Or are we talking the size of, like, an okapi?
We're talking like the size of a large rat.
Okay, wow. Ugh.
Yeah, but also, not a giant shark that's going to eat you.
Oh,
Like-
and Ugly German Truce is challenging me. Now do Eyjafjallajökull. I've been to Iceland. Look, these aren't going to be easy, but they're not like impossible.
See, Vishanti's got it. I don't. I'm not even going to try that one. But anyway, so there's additional safety on land because the main predators of these fish were not on land. But also there's things to eat. There's bugs, there's plants, stuff like that. So yeah, there are selection pressures to be able to go on land. Both predator evasion and resource exploitation. And you might think, well, what good is like Tiktaalik going to be at like exploiting resources on land? Well, when there's not much competition, you don't have to be very good at it. If you're the first organism to enter a niche, you don't have to be very good at that niche. And yeah.
DM verifying the mystery flesh pit wing says, well, why would an animal evolve to fill a niche? That's unheard of.
Yeah, crazy talk. Everyone knows that organisms avoid filling open niches. It's definitely how it works. That's why, the history of life on Earth, there's just so few things like apex predators or browsing herbivores or insectivorous tree-dwelling animals, almost unheard of.
Yeah, I don't even know what those are.
Yeah, I mean, I probably made up at least 2 of them.
Yeah, sounds fake.
Mm-hmm.
But they believed that it did take place, and of course it took millions of years of time for that to happen.
I mean, I guess it's a weird thing with Christians do this sometimes. They're like, oh, how long did it take for this to evolve into this? And the answer is like, well, I don't know. Do you mean like how long has it been since the population split? How long has it been since there was a transition from this morphology to this other morphology? What counts as having transitioned to land? Like we have up here a salamander. Does that count as a terrestrial tetrapod, or is that still semi-aquatic? Like, it's just such a weird question, right? Like, you can say, hey, how long did it take for World War I to be fought? You can come up with an answer for that, right? Because it has a definitive start date, and it has a pretty definitive end date with, the Treaty of Versailles. Like, okay, well, that's an easy question. When it's like, how long did it take for humans to evolve from apes? It's like, well, they're still apes, and like, I don't know, like, what counts as having finished this process, and what counts as having started it? And there's no clear answer to this. Pelagic Tunicate, Truth Official, for €2 says, larger scorpions the size of smaller scorpions. Yes. I love that.
Nice. Me too.
A small boulder the size of a large boulder is on the street. Oh, okay.
I can't explain it, but that is just such a Jewish meme. Like,
at least they're not at least not half the size of a giraffe.
Yeah. Americans will do anything to avoid using the metric system.
or even just their own system. Americans will do anything to avoid using actual units. All right, here we go.
As the fish gradually evolved and became an amphibian, such as a salamander or a frog or a toad or something.
Okay, so salamanders and frogs and toads, toads are just a paraphyletic grouping of more terrestrial than normal frogs. There's an actual group of true toads, but there are many other frogs that are called toads because of their terrestriality. Anyway.
No true toadsman fallacy.
Yeah. Those do not evolve until long after the initial evolution of tetrapods. And there's this misunderstanding that was prevalent at the time, not helped very much by the fact that at the time, most taxonomists were still not really too concerned about making their taxa like monophyletic or anything, where you have these, first fish evolved into amphibians, by which you might think modern amphibians, which are in a group unto themselves called Lysamphibia, which itself is sister to Amniota. The actual first tetrapods are basal to both modern amphibians and modern amniotes. And so they're not amphibians in the sense of members of Lysamphibia. These first tetrapods were not frogs and they were not salamanders. They were neither of these things. They were things like labyrinthodonts, which there are no currently extant members of, unless maybe amniotes or Lysamphibians evolved from labyrinthodonts, which we don't know. So it is not the case that scientists think that these fish evolved into frogs and salamanders, and then from frogs and salamanders, we have lizards evolving. That is not the case. Lizards and frogs and salamanders share a common ancestor that was neither a lizard nor a frog nor a salamander.
It's like with is it hippos and elephants, where if you go back far enough, you can't tell which one it is, so to speak.
No, it's manatees and elephants.
Manatees and elephants, thanks.
Which is even crazier. Because just looking at them externally, if I had to guess which animal was more like an elephant, a manatee or a hippo, I'd probably pick the one with 4 legs that doesn't have a tail fluke.
Yeah.
Right? And yet, nope. It's manatees, and when you look at the earliest manatee, well, Sirenians, and the earliest proboscideans, they're basically identical. Like, oh, look, the earliest Sirenians are a little bit more elongate. And they have a different kind of tooth. Oh, okay. And that's it. That's like the big difference between early Sirenians and early proboscideans. All right, here we go.
Something like that. A creature that spends much time on the land, much time in the water, and must lay its eggs in the water because those eggs do not have shells, such as in the case of the reptile.
It's actually the amniotic sac that's more important than the shell. Shells do help, but the current hypothesis for the evolution of the amnion is that the amniotic sac was actually evolved first, and then later shell coverings came to further enhance
really feel like this would be a perfect time for the clip about the Cambrian explosion from Bill Wirtz's video about the history of the world and stuff.
Well, alas, I don't think
animals
I have it.
going out of the water, and it's like, yeah, why would I want to? You know, I gotta lay eggs in the water, but also there's no food, so I don't care.
Yeah. All right. We are gonna get a little bit more Dwayne in.
Now, of course, if that's really true, then the fins of the fish had to gradually change into feet and legs of the amphibian. Now, there's a characteristic, you see.
Oh, man, if only we had things like Tiktaalik or acanthostega to show the exact thing that he's talking about.
If only.
Oh well, I guess we don't.
Oh, well.
We don't have these named and already described fossil taxa. They don't exist.
Yeah.
It's the hypothetical Tiktaalik. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely never seen the fossils.
Yeah.
That would have changed something quite obvious that we could look for. We could imagine what the intermediate forms may have resembled, so we know what to look for. Well, what kind of...
He's actually right. Well, first of all, thanks for showing Ichthyostega on screen, which is just... Thanks, man. Yep. For $2 says, the sun is a deadly laser. It's true.
The sun is a deadly laser.
Actually, I found out that
not
apparently...
anymore, there's a blanket.
Apparently, something like 85 people died in Arizona this past year from, contact with the, something like 70 degrees Celsius pavement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. There's a reason the dogs don't get walked as much this time of year.
Yeah, and you really, if you do take your dogs out, you really need to get them a little paw protection.
Mm-hmm. Or just go in the middle of the night.
They're asking me for the slideshow yodel.
I
don't need no stinking slideshow in order to yodel, but...
It's true. Do I actually have the slideshow loaded into the scene? I don't. I know, right?
You should have that ready to go, so even if you only play 3 seconds of it at a time.
So one of the things I want to point out, though, about this, right, is that not only do we have... Yeah, call the copyright monger. Yeah, here's the thing, right? The pavement gets much, much hotter than the air, right? And the air around here can be close to 50 degrees. That's a thing. And T-Man says, fix your state's obsession with pavement. Look, I would, right? Or at least get them to paint it all white. Right? Have white streets with black lines instead of black streets with white lines. How about that? But they won't.
I mean, good luck making asphalt white, and
just mix a bunch of titanium oxide in it.
Sure.
Sure, it'll be fine. Yeah, it'll be fine. Or just paint it.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Or instead of asphalt, use more concrete. There's options. They're not great options, but yeah. Anyway, Right. I was going to talk about the fact that Tiktaalik, which is, right exactly where you want the transition to be between this Euthenopteron type fish here and this ichthyostega looking tetrapod, it was found because of predictions from evolutionary biology, right?
Mhm. The thing that he said, that we didn't have, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, because evolution's like, oh, hey, if this transition happened, we should expect to find it at around this time in the geological, time scale. And in this kind of environment, where do we have such exposed rocks? Oh, over in the northern part of what's already just an entirely frozen wasteland called Canada. Let's go dig there, and we'll try not to get eaten by polar bears while we do it.
And guess what?
Mm-hmm.
They found it.
Yup.
Funny that. It's almost like evolution is a, theory with a solid model that keeps getting tested and
Yeah, and making
such.
predictions that come true.
Predictions that come true, which is, what you want out of a good solid model.
DM verifying the mystery flesh pit wing says Dapper advocating for whitewashing. I mean, in the sense of like architectural elements that are in one of the hottest inhabited places on Earth. Yes, I absolutely am.
When it comes to pavement in Arizona, you bet your sweet bippy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There are things that are better off being painted or otherwise colored white. And buildings in Arizona are one of those things. Yeah. All right, here we go.
Evidence do we have for such a change? Well, on this slide, we see a reproduction of the fish in the upper portion of the slide that is supposed to be the ancestor of the amphibian.
No. Once again,
No.
we don't have the ability to determine whether or not this fish, which is representative of the likely ancestral anatomy, is itself a direct ancestor. Could it be? Yeah, sure. But it's more likely that it's not. However, it still has the predicted anatomy. And by the way, his lack of centering this slide is on him, not me. It's not centered even in the original video. Although, to be fair, he's also not all that centered, which I suppose I could fix a little bit here. I'm ruining everything.
Gosh.
I know, it's pretty terrible.
Okay. But
yeah,
those margins are kind of making my eyes twitch.
Yeah, well, here we go.
Yeah.
In the lower portion of the slide, we see a reproduction of what is supposed to be the world's oldest known amphibian.
Oh my god, I'm sorry. I can't believe he literally just said supposedly.
And also the world's oldest amphibian, which it's not. First of all, it's not even an amphibian in the sense of being a list amphibian. Second, it's not the oldest. We found older ones, but then again, maybe it was at the time he was given a talk.
Now, why do evolutionists believe that fish evolved into the amphibian? Well,
I mean, first, they don't, but why do they think that its anatomy is representative of the fish that did? Well, a big part of it is the limb bones, right? So fish have pelvic fins and pectoral fins, right? Which correspond to your pectoral girdle and your arms, and your pelvic girdle and your legs. And in these fish, like Euthenopteron, these stegocephalian fish, what you tend to get is you get one bone up near the actual shoulder bones, the pectoral girdles, which in Euthenopteron are still connected to the rest of the skull. And then you get two bones. Then you get a bunch of blobby bones. And then you get some ray-like bones, which is essentially how your limbs are already structured. You got the femur or the humerus. Then you got the radius and ulna or the tibia and fibula. And then you've got your tarsals or your carpals. And then you've got the ray bits. They're like your metatarsals or metacarpals and phalanges. So it's the same basic bone setup. Now, why would there be a group of fish in the fossil record whose basic skeletal system for their fins is essentially the same as that of tetrapod limbs?
I'm gonna say it rhymes with haired crancestry.
Yeah, maybe. Also, Heather Coon says CaCO3 is cheaper than titanium oxide. All right, then fine, mix that into the tar. I'm just saying, we should increase the albedo of basically all man-made structures within Arizona. The only thing that should be have a low albedo are solar panels. That's it.
Yep, agreed.
Everything else should basically be as blindingly white as possible, making sunglasses mandatory. All right, here we go.
First of all, you note that there's some bones in the fins that evolutionists believe could have evolved into the feet and legs of the amphibian. You note, of course, that there's several other fins that had bones, but apparently he found some way to get rid of these.
I love how he says it, like, oh, apparently he got rid of some way to do this. But creationists will look all the time at other bits of evolution. Like, well, that's just reductive evolution. That doesn't really count. Like, oh, you mean this lizard lost its legs, even though other members of its same family, which we consider a kind, still have legs? That's fine. It's just reductive evolution. And you know what? To some degree, they're right. It's pretty easy to lose an anatomical feature. All you have to do is have the genes that are your developmental genes, right, like your Hox genes and such, that are activated to produce a structure, and just not activate. That's it. Or activate for less time. Or activate so late in development that it doesn't matter much anymore. That's it. There's numerous ways to get rid of anatomical structures. And creationists are usually okay with it. But here it's a little inconvenient. So like, oh, well, somehow it got rid of its anal fin and its dorsal fin. Yeah, no, can't have that. But also, we're coming up here on that halfway point. I'm going to get myself a fresh drink because, I mean, remember how I said like sometimes it gets up around like 50 degrees? It's not that hot.
Too damn hot.
But it's still hot. It's in the 40s. So I'm going to get myself some more ice-cold beverages, and we will be back right after the musical stylings of Beethoven, no relation to Kent, obviously. Jeez, sorry about that, Bent. And also, probably a message from not a sponsor, but just, whatever ads YouTube decides to throw at you. So we will be right back. Okay, we are back. Welcome back, everybody.
Mashach!
No. Mashach.
Mashach.
Because we're back.
Two of us.
Yeah, that's right. Mashach, not Gish. Also, to say I'm back, we could go with Mashach for again. We're here again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mashach. Anyway, that's enough of a Klingon lesson for now. You guys aren't here for Klingon lessons, unless you are, in which case we could set up a separate stream for Klingon lessons. But yeah. So, now that we're back, I want to say a few things before we get back into the Gish video, one of which is that, you guys, thank you so much for all your support of both me and Bent. Remember, if you are interested and you can afford it, Bent's auto repair fundraiser, which has just passed the 2,000 mark with a $50 donation from Carrie Bronson. Thank you very much, Carrie Bronson. And we'll refresh that to make sure it updates. That is right there in the pinned comment. And also, do I have it in the description? Yes, it is in the description too. That will be staying up for at least as long as it takes to get the car back. Possibly a bit longer, just in case. So, if you can afford it, and you are willing to help Benthoven in a tough spot right now, as I've said before, but it bears repeating, Benthoven is a disabled veteran who, after years of abuse from the VA, had his career more or less stolen from him, and who is currently trying to get back on his feet, get back into that career field, and sort of start most of his adult life over again for the third time, which is not easy to do. And his car recently broke down, which is a bit of a problem for all of those things, because this is the United States that he lives in, and public transport sucks in the United States. So, Fearmonger says, Mashach for we have returned. Yeah, if you want to put that in the perfective, that's fine. Works for me. I was thinking more as like translating we're back rather than we have returned, which, yeah, I would agree that Mashach would be we have returned more than we're back. Yeah, although I do think that either one would work pretty well. It just depends on how you're thinking about the returning. Anyway, enough of that. The other thing I want to say is, if you are also interested in supporting the channel, because most of the money that the channel brings in is directly from fans who support the channel, there are two great ways to do that. One is the channel memberships, which starts at $1.99 a month. It gets you access to early access videos. 2 videos came out today for early access, totaling over 2 hours, I believe, in length. So there, you could just get 2 hours extra from today by just being a channel member or a patron. The Patreon comes over, it's linked in the description, starts at $1 a month, or you can get a 12% discount if you go annually. You get access to all those early access videos. You don't get the emojis, though. And it's just a great way to help the channel out. If you don't want to do a annual or a monthly pledge, that's not your thing, there's also a merch store linked in the description. I also have a wish list, so does Bent, so does Vishanti, which is linked. And Bent also has his own Patreon in case you want things like rough cuts of his music or things like that as he's working on it. That is also a possibility if you want to help support either me or Bent or Vishanti. So now that we've got the shilling out of the way, let's continue on with some more Dwayne Gish.
Allowing the others to evolve into feet and leg. Now, the evolutionists also suggest there's a similarity in the vertebrae, shows some connection, and there's a similarity in the pattern of bones in the skull. Now, these are
Homologous.
Yeah, it's almost like homologous features, which there's no reason to expect from from design at all, really. Yeah, because the thing is, intelligent designers can just copy paste things and result in what in living things would be called chimeras. Yeah, like there's no reason why the earliest tetrapods should have the exact same bones in the skull as the later stegocephalian non-tetrapod fish, even where those bones are somewhat unique, like tabular bones. Yeah, there's not a good reason to have those unless evolution's true.
Characteristics which are supposed to indicate that fish was the ancestor of the amphibian. But I want you to know, first of all, the fish was a fish.
Yes, Guy, that's how it works. if it wasn't a fish, then no one would be saying that amphibians evolved from fish. What are you talking about?
Homologies or tautologies.
Yeah, seriously.
100% fish. It had a lovely set of fins designed for balancing, steering, and locomotion in the water.
Vishanti, do you remember the first rule of Tautology Club? I think that's a no. Wait.
No, I do not.
The first rule of Tautology Club is the first rule of Tautology Club.
Indeed.
Look at the amphibian. What do you know? He had the basic amphibian limb.
Ah, cool. If only we hadn't found Tiktaalik that had intermediate limbs between Ichthyostega and Eusthenopteron. Darn it! Oh,
How
no!
inconvenient.
Oh, look. Who could have ever guessed that would happen? Oh, wait. That's right. Neil Shubin, the guy who used evolutionary biology to make a prediction about where he would find such a fossil. And then,
And then found it.
Found it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Darn it. If only that hadn't happened.
Feet and legs. There's not a trace of an intermediate form.
Yeah, when you gave
Here's
this talk.
Tiktaalik.
Mm-hmm. Since then, turns out we found more fossils, and now we have intermediate fossils. Yep.
Aged like milk.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, that's creationism myth broadly. It tends to age like milk.
Yeah.
Furthermore, note the pelvic bone of the fish. Very small, loosely embedded in muscle. There is no connection between the pelvic bone of the fish and the vertebral column. Well,
Why would there need to be?
Yeah, man, it's not supporting weight. There's not a big connection between the pelvic girdle of Tiktaalik either, because it wasn't mostly supporting its weight above land for long
They
periods
don't
of time.
walk on their back fin. Like they're. What is happening?
Oh, man. And the thing, basically, he's just complaining, man, how could this thing evolve from this thing when this thing is what it is? I don't know how to answer that question, man. Like, it's like looking at a lizard and saying, how could a legless lizard evolve from this leg lizard when it has legs? Like, yeah, that's kind of the point of leglessness evolving from having legs. Starts with legs and it ends with not.
Why would their pelvis need to be connected to their spine when it's not load bearing at all? Like, they're in the water, man. What do you expect?
Is the claim that like nothing about mutation or natural selection could favor firmer and firmer attachment between the spine and the pelvic girdle? Because I don't see why that would be the case. Because in order to say like, oh, why would this be the case? You have to say it comes with the background assumption that evolution could do other things, right? And we know that he accepts microevolution, so he does agree that evolution can cause some things. But then he points to this, he's like, well, see, could it do this? And the answer is like, well, I don't know, could it? What's your argument against it? Because you seem to think that things like ear size or limb proportions or fur density can be affected by evolution through microevolution. Why is it that the positioning of the pelvic girdle can't be? What prevents that from being subject to evolution? Unlike
Dapper, you see, it's reasons.
Oh, yes, I forgot reasons. How silly of me.
All important reasons.
How silly of me. I should have known better.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Well, none is needed. The fins do not support the weight of the body. But look at the pelvic bone.
Why
of the
would
amphibian.
they need to?
Oh no, it's
very
crashing.
large and firmly anchored to the vertebral column. That is the type of anatomy you need for four-legged locomotion.
2138 is where we were.
Dwayne.
Robert Madewell, for 26 months, sends what looks like a blank membership chat. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to get the video back. Vishanti, if you could keep an eye out for Robert Madewell in case he decides to leave a message that does have something which was supposed to be in there. Because I don't want to not read it because he forgot to type it in or like YouTube did something silly.
Aye.
So keep an eye out for that while I bring back the video to 2138, which is where we were.
But yeah, this is just a really dumb argument. Like,
Alibi.
Why would these structures need to be load-bearing? They're fish. They live in the water. They're swimming around. You don't need weight-bearing structures when you're less dense than the water. What's happening?
Oh, what's happening is absolute chaos. That's what's happening. All right, let's get back to where we were. 21, 30, whatever. Well,
Are you gonna
26.
share the video to me?
Yes, but I have to get it to the point
Okay,
first.
great.
Otherwise, there's no point.
Okay, gosh.
Goodness. And this is probably also going to mess up the audio levels, but whatever, we'll be fine. All right. Oh, Robert Mabel, do you know what to say? Well, hey, you know what? Thank you very much for being a member for over a year. That is... I really appreciate that. That's how you get that cool little Dapper badge right there. Is once you're at 1
Also,
year, you get the Dapper face badge.
Herbsman Williams does note that I have a good Kent impression. You can watch more of me doing Kent impressions when we go through his, quote, dissertation.
Oh, goodness. What was that, 6-part series?
We're going pasta mining.
That's my favorite thing. It's when Kent implies very heavily that you dig spaghetti out of the ground and that's how spaghetti works. It's just like, what is happening?
So many memes came out of that.
KJV get book title.
Get title. KJV get title.
Oh, man.
Uh,
Alright, here we go.
Furthermore, note the pelvic bone of the fish. Very small, loosely...
Oh yeah, over 2 years. Silver Harlow points out, because I can't math, apparently. I say that despite the fact that my job requires lots of math all the time. But then I get to, like, you know... Oh, hey, how many months are in a year? Who knows? It's made up. Don't worry about it.
At least 7.
Yeah. Yeah,
which is technically correct.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, if you've been a member for 2 years, and you've also been a member for 1 year, so...
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Embedded in muscle. There is no connection between the pelvic bone of the fish and the vertebral column. Well, none is needed.
There doesn't need to
The
be.
fins do not support the weight of the body.
Yeah, because it's a fish. That's the whole point.
The fish, yeah.
But look at the pelvic bone of the amphibian. It's very large and firmly anchored to the vertebral column.
Hey, guys.
It's almost like it walks on land or something.
Right? Did you guys know that different animals have different anatomy?
Wow!
I know. Shocking revelations. Goodness. How could this animal that's not the same animal as this other animal have different anatomy and yet be related? I don't know, Dwayne. That's kind of the whole point.
Why does this animal that's not a bird have no feathers? I don't know.
Yeah, impossible
that
to
sounds
say.
Dumb. Shut up.
That is the type of anatomy you need for four-legged locomotion.
Hence, it's the kind of anatomy that evolved by the time that something became fully terrestrially locomoting.
Right.
Which is... It's like, yes, Dwayne, that's the point. Thank you for making the point for me.
It's daytime because the sun came out.
Yeah.
Yes, Dwayne.
That is how that works.
That's how it works.
Oh, man. This is a weird freeze frame, too, because we're in the middle of a fade transition.
This would make a good meme template.
Tremendous difference.
And not.
Oh, hey, Fear Baby.
Jillian Run says, explain whale pelvises, Dwayne.
Yes. And also, Fear Babies violate conservation of mass monger. Yes. Says, and your point is bingo. Good.
Yep.
Glad you got the bingo.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I love the babies violate the conservation of mass thing.
Just when you think something can't get more dumb.
I know. Oh, man.
What?
I think the only person who's made that claim that I've covered is Yosef Mizrahi, but it was such a ridiculous claim.
It's just so dumb.
Oh, man. How do babies grow if they don't eat? It's like, well, they do eat. They just don't take it in orally. There's this thing called the umbilical cord. Maybe you've never had a baby or seen a baby be born there, Yosef, but, like, there's a reason it's connected to the mom by a flesh tube. All right.
One single intermediate has ever been found showing something partway between the fin and the feet and legs.
Well.
Hey, guess what? All you need's one.
And do we have that one?
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
We do.
It's almost like it's Tiktaalik. Oops. Oh, but here's the thing. Once, if Gish were now aware of Tiktaalik, if he were still alive, he would just be able to say, "Ah, I have you now." For where is the intermediate between this Tiktaalik and primitive fish?
Yes.
I mean, he would just
Dr.
go
Banjoing his way through
exactly.
life.
He would just go full Dr. Banjo, because it's what they always do. No matter how many intermediate forms you find, they'd be like, "Ah, well, then where's the intermediate forms between these?" Well, I don't know, man. How many are enough? There is no number.
I really need to request that you upload into your scenes for next time the rocket pushing the goalpost.
Remind me, so that way I will remember, because that's how that works.
Okay.
Oh, and Heather Kuhn also has a bingo. Nice. Okay.
I didn't even keep up with my bingo card. I started out and then I forgot about it.
I never do, because I'm already doing enough
It's a lot.
multitasking, and yeah, keeping track of a bingo card is way too much. On top of all the other things, obviously. It's not too much on its own, but yeah. All right, here we go.
Showing these other changes. Now here we see an exhibit from the Chicago Museum of Natural History a number of years ago of the evolution of the fish into the amphibian. And you'll note, in between, there's a remarkable transitional form, part fish and part amphibian. What remarkable
it
evidence
ended up being Tiktaalik.
Yeah.
for evolution. Isn't that convincing? How could you see an exhibit like this and not believe in evolution? Well, if you look at the fine print under that intermediate form, you'll find that it's labeled inferred intermediate.
Yeah, it is. And here's the cool thing, right? Evolution.
We've heard it.
Yeah. Evolution posits that certain organisms evolved from other organisms and that they share common ancestry with other organisms, and therefore makes predictions about what the organisms during that transition would look like. And then sometimes we go out and find them. Like, guys, have you heard of Tetropteryx?
Actually, I have not.
So Tetropteryx was a hypothetical ancestor of birds that had 4 wings and was kind of dinosaurian with a long bony tail and unfused wing fingers, that was thought up by paleontologists before we actually had an extensive fossil record of the transitions between basal dinosaurs and birds. And then you know what we found out about birds like Archaeopteryx and even earlier not necessarily earlier, but even things that are even farther away from birds that were still using feathers for aerodynamic purposes, like Anchiornis? They had the predicted 4 wings. They had hind wings on their legs and 4 wings on their forearms. Exactly what was predicted. And how was this prediction made? Well, it was noticed that bird legs were a lot like dinosaur legs. And it was also noted that certain fairly common mutations in some birds could result in asymmetric veined feathers sprouting from their legs instead of the normal scales. So, it was hypothesized before these fossils were ever found that, hey, maybe the earliest birds that evolved from reptiles actually started out with wings both on their arms and their legs, and that they used both sets for aerodynamic purposes to increase lift. And then we found more than one example.
You know, this keeps happening.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Huh. It's almost like there's something to this whole evolution thing. Almost. Oh, and Tripulic was coming in with the wings and Fade to Grey too. Yes,
Hey,
send wings. Send
yes.
wings.
Well, inferred indeed. It's strictly imaginary.
Well, it was. Till, I'll keep saying it. Tiktaalik.
We found them.
Mm-hmm.
No one has ever been able to find such a transitional form. The great collection of fossils in Chicago could not produce it.
Yet, Dwayne. You're forgetting the word yet. Because then it happened.
I just love how everything in biology just started clowning all over him.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that's frustrating. Also, Chris D. Reese just gave $10 to the fundraiser. Thank you very much. I was really appreciated. Hey guys, we are currently 53 away from getting to the halfway point on that fundraiser. That's pretty good. I know Ben would really appreciate having a half-off transmission replacement. Because my goodness. Because yeah, it's a pretty big blow to someone who has been struggling just to get to being break even for years,
Yeah.
ever since his career was stolen out from under him as a result of medical malpractice. Which, by the way, technically you can sue the VA. You know how many lawyers are willing to do so?
Like, almost none.
It is basically none. Bent has checked with numerous lawyers. And by numerous, I mean scores. No one's even willing to bother.
Ugh.
Yep. So, even though it's very clearly medical malpractice, and I mean, like, just throwing paperwork in the trash level medical malpractice.
Ugh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No museum in the world could produce it. No scientist could produce it, so they had the artist produce it.
So here's one of the things, right? It's not technically a God of the Gaps thing, but it's another example of relying on current gaps to then say, well, since we currently don't know this thing, then the thing that indicates that it would be true if, this thing were true, must be false, right? If evolution is true, there should be a transitional form between, like Eusynopteron and Ichthyostega. Correct. We don't currently have it. At the time, also correct. Therefore, the transition didn't happen. Well, hold up. That only works if we know that we have both, as I've said before, found every fossil species that's ever been preserved, and 2, if every species that's ever lived has been preserved. We know neither of these things are true. So at best, Dwayne could say, we do not have positive evidence from the fossil record supporting this transition. That is the most he could say at the time. That would be honest. Instead, he goes way further and says, because we do not have positive evidence from the fossil record specifically for this exact stage in this transition, even though we have other stages of it in Ichthyostega itself, therefore the transition didn't happen. That does not follow. Yeah.
And it's like Dead Kennedy in Space noted this earlier. It's like missing one little segment of train track and then just assuming the rest of the train track never existed. That's foolishness.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, here we go.
But you see, that's not science. That's artistic license.
Yes, Dwayne. The specific depiction there is in fact artistic license, explaining a theory. Right? It's just like when NASA puts up an artist impression of a new exoplanet, that they had an artist draw a fun picture to visualize the actual data that they have, which is just blips on a graph, which is not fun to look at unless you are a exoplanet hunter, does not mean that the exoplanet didn't exist, right? So if someone's like, oh, hey, look, here's a picture of the TRAPPIST-1 system, which is a system with exoplanets that we know about. That's not going to actually be a photograph. Because the way we actually know about the TRAPPIST system, right, is like things like, oh, the star wobbles back and forth a little bit, and sometimes its brightness dips ever so slightly, periodically.
Yeah.
Indicating exoplanets. And then we use a whole bunch of very, very sophisticated math and techniques involving very careful measurements to try to figure out the orbital distances and masses and diameters of these planets. The fact that artistic license is then used to tell the public about it doesn't negate any of the data. And the thing is that all the data that we have about this evolutionary process, including now extensive genetic data about the relatedness of all tetrapods and their relationship to various groups of fish, like for instance the fact that you are more genetically similar to an African lungfish than that African lungfish is to a goldfish. Why would that be the case? Hard to imagine, unless evolution is true.
Yeah.
So,
and like, this is how you know you have a good model. It makes a prediction, and you later confirm the prediction by discovering the thing that it predicted. Like, the same way that they discovered, was it Uranus or Neptune that they discovered using gravitational anomalies? Neptune. It's like, hey, we're noticing some wackadoo things going on with, the orbit of Uranus and some other stuff. Like, I wonder what's causing that. And some guy goes, hey, according to my calculations, probably a planet out there. We should go looking in a specific place. And guess what? They found it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Neptune.
Not just that there was a planet. He figured out where it should be in its orbit.
Where it should be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it was. And
so, hey, go point your telescopes here. And we found it.
Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens with evolution all the time. So, Oh, Cindy Bidwell Glaze liked my my lightning simulation that I spent way too
Ooh.
long tweaking. So by the way, guys, yeah, if you are a channel member, I uploaded two 17-second animatics just for members, so that you can see like some updates to how my I'm working on a new avatar style for occasional use. You know how I have like the Dapper Zord, and I've got Dapper with feathers and without feathers? I'm adding what I like to call a Cyber Dapper. So
Powered by the Event Horizon Drive.
yes, exactly. Powered by the Event Horizon Drive. Yeah, because
Where you're going, you don't need eyes to see.
Mm-mm. No, you do not. However, you do need to be able to speak some basic Latin, apparently. Because that was one of the parts of that movie that was less well explained. Was why is this weird, horrific hell recording all Latin?
Well, because everybody speaks Latin in hell, don't you know?
Is that how that works?
Yeah, obviously.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's actually one of the
I mean, I
weirdest.
keep saying it in the movies, it must be true.
That's one of the weirdest tropes about like exorcism, like movies and whatnot. Is like the liturgical language of the Catholic Church must be the actual language of hell. Why?
Yep. They have the most popular fanfic.
I guess, but it's also not even the like default liturgical language of the Catholic Church anymore. Oh well.
Well, I mean, if you're a tradcast, but
Yeah. Well, every once in a while you do get some exorcism movies or demon movies about like other religions. So,
I mean, you know how many non-Catholic exorcism movies I've seen? One.
I've seen more.
And the exorcism was performed by a Jewish rabbi who was unfortunately played by Gary Oldman.
Yeah, there was that. I saw that one. There's been a few others. Like
I mean,
there was the
he
one.
did a great job, and his Hebrew was good, but it was just like, oh, Gary Oldman.
There was also that one where like the exorcist was like a Protestant who thought it was all like bunk, but it was making him good money. But then he found a possession case that seemed to be real or something. That was another one that wasn't a Catholic.
Which one was that?
I don't remember the name, but if anyone does remember the name to an exorcism movie with that plot, let me know. It was a found footage style film.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about exorcism movies and the weird like
I'll get off on our weird tangents.
yeah, the weird monopoly of like the Catholic Church on supernatural fiction, which is just weird.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia Williams, who's been a member for 15 months and is at the tetrapod level, says it's because the Protestants dunk on the Catholics. Yeah, maybe that is why.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is an admission of failure. They've never found any intermediate form.
This is the same kind of argument as like the Higgs boson can't possibly be real because we didn't find it, and then the new Large Hadron Collider comes online and it's like, oh hey, look,
Find it.
we found the Higgs
We
boson.
made one in the lab.
And it's just like, oh, okay, well, so like now.
Yeah, but it's not what you think it is.
Oh, okay.
It's pushing that goalpost into orbit, man.
Thanks, Roger.
Mm-hmm.
Probably an electron that's also made of a muon and an electron, which is also made of a muon and an electron. Which
It's
means
muons and electrons all the way down.
All right, here we go.
Now on this slide, we see a picture of one of the preserved specimen of a remarkable fish called a coelacanth.
This is not a fish. This is just a picture of one.
Thanks, Kent. It is a cool preserved coelacanth, right? And coelacanths are cool fish.
Yeah.
Coelacanth. Now the coelacanth fish is supposed to be a very, very close cousin, very close kin to the fish that evolved into the amphibians.
I mean, okay, so I've actually looked this up. Estimated divergence time between the coelacanths and Ripidistia, which is the group that lungfish and tetrapods belong to, is about like 20 million years before we actually get, it's about like, yeah, by the time that we get like fossils that we can recognize as Ripidistians or coelacanths, there's like 20 million years of separation before that, right?
Mm.
Which means that now there's something like 230 million years separating coelacanths from tetrapods. But also, among extant lobe-finned fish, the lungfish, which are now only found in Africa and South America, are also closer to tetrapods, being in Ripidistia. But within that, we have extinct stegocephalian fish like Euthenopteron, whose skeleton Mr. Gish, helpfully showed, which are even closer to tetrapods than the lungfish, and also in Ripidistio. So like calling this a close cousin it's a bit of a stretch, right? Like
Yeah.
it's sort of like saying, "Oh, look, this porcupine is basically a human." Well, I mean,
What?
it's much more like
Um,
I could find things that are much less like a human than a porcupine, but still, it's not that much like a human, really. Yeah.
Jillian Wren's asking if the preserved coelacanth is still at the LA Natural History Museum. I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't remember
I don't
seeing
recall
it.
seeing one.
So maybe not. Maybe it was only on loan, or maybe it's just taken
Yeah.
off a display because they do cycle displays, and
Yeah.
retire displays. But yeah, I don't remember seeing one.
I don't either. I would have taken a photo of it.
And yeah, Robert Madewell points out they're more closely related to tetrapods than they are to teleosts, which is most of the fish that you think of, like goldfish and carp and tuna and whatnot. And yeah, I mean, coelacanths are definitely more closely related to you than they are to other fish like goldfish or carp, and yeah, so which is interesting, right? Like, why would the coelacanth be genetically more similar to you than it is to other fish with which it shares its environment? Well, there's this thing you might have heard of.
Ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, evolutionists believe for a very long time that the coelacanth fish had become extinct, they say, 70 million years ago.
It's 66, but whatever. I think 70 was probably a reasonable estimate at the time.
Order of magnitude.
Yeah. Like, look, I will point out when we've learned new things, but I'm not going to fault Dwayne for not having the data that we have now, right? So when he says, oh, they haven't found an intermediate between Ichthyostega and, like, Eusynopteron, he was right at the time. He was just wrong to use that as an argument. So I'm not going to fault him for going with 70 million when it was probably a reasonable estimate at the time. 66 is where we should be going. But anyway.
Now they postulate that this fish evolved 400 million years ago, and
yeah, that's about right.
Then he died out 70 million years ago. Because, they say, in rocks 70 million years or younger, they have never found fossils of that fish. So obviously...
That remains true, by the way.
Yeah.
We still do not have any Cenozoic coelacanth fossils at all. Not a one.
He died out 70 million years ago. Until 1938, when he's found to be alive and well off the coast of Africa. And
one of the kinds of coelacanths.
Yeah, so currently there are
just one.
Yeah, there are currently 2 species of coelacanth, both in the genus Latimeria, and they are both deep sea organisms. And I want to drive home what this means, right? When you look at, say, the late Cretaceous, there are coelacanths everywhere. There are coelacanths in lakes, in rivers, in shallow marine environments. We don't actually have a whole lot of deep sea deposits, so we don't know if they were in the deep sea. Presumably they were, because we have them there now. But they were basically ubiquitous in aquatic habitats, whether freshwater or saltwater. At the KPG boundary, they ceased to exist in the fossil record completely. So something clearly happened to the group, right? Even if there were some stragglers. Yeah. This is not an example where, like, apparently nothing happened to the coelacanths. They just did just fine. Like, no, clearly not, right?
Yeah.
So
if I were spitballing, I would say the fact that they went from being ubiquitous in salt and freshwater, and then they're only found in, like, a very small specific region in a deep sea environment means that their adaptation to the environmental changes that cause the KT boundary is probably what made them go to that isolated region and adapt to, like, deep sea life. But I'm not a biologist. What do I know?
And I'll give another example, right? Let's say that there was some disaster, and every single species of canine went extinct except the dhole, which is a kind of canine from, like, Central Asia, right? That's the only one left. All the dogs are gone, all the wolves are gone, all the maned wolves are gone, all the painted dogs are gone, all the coyotes, the jackals, the foxes,
dingoes,
they're all gone. Yeah. But the dhole was hanging on in one little isolated pocket of forest over in, like, India. Something significant must have happened, right? The fact that one species managed to evade this disaster doesn't mean nothing happened, right? And it doesn't mean there wasn't an extinction of the rest of this group. All that happened was we went from all of coelacanths died to all of coelacanths except for one genus with 2 species died. I don't know what that's supposed to say about evolution. Like, yeah, okay, one tiny group of coelacanths managed to survive what killed literally the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just don't understand the point of the argument. But maybe, you know what, maybe Gish will be the first one to actually make it make sense for me as to why this is supposed to be an argument.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you have to really think about how fossilization occurs, and then go, we only find them in deep sea environments. Is the deep sea like a real good place to fossilize a lot of stuff?
Not only is it an abysmal place to fossilize stuff, see what I did there?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Not only is that the case, also, deep sea, like rock and sediment, tends not to be much more than a few tens of millions of years old.
Mm.
Which means even if something did fossilize down there from the Cenozoic, it would almost certainly have subducted and melted by now. So, yeah.
Because again, plate tectonics, they're a thing.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go.
Almost like that turns over the seafloor quite often.
Yes, it does.
At that time, several dozen specimens of this creature has been found.
I mean, now you can just take diving tours to go see them.
Yeah.
Guess what?
You could eat them too. Are they protected?
I don't know. I hope they are, because I believe both species are at least threatened.
Okay.
I wouldn't eat a coelacanth.
Not that I would just go, start in a coelacanth fishing industry, but I am curious.
Look, it's a very common human urge when encountering a new animal to wonder what it tastes like.
Can I eat this?
Yeah. Is food?
Ape is like, is food?
All right, here we go.
Forgot to evolve. He's just the same old
toddlers when they're
fish
just
he was supposedly
learning how the world works
70
and they
million years ago.
do everything or stick it in their mouth.
All right, we have to talk about the
Tell me-
coelacanth hasn't evolved.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, first of all, modern Latimeria, which is the genus to which both species of coelacanth belong, are not identical to any fossil coelacanth. There are literally no fossil coelacanths that you could mistake for Latimeria if you knew anything about coelacanths, right? That's just not what happened. Second, there is in fact no requirement that particular lineages undergo any particular amount of morphological change in a particular amount of time, right? If an organism is so well adapted to its niche that significant morphological deviation from its current anatomy would be disadvantageous, then natural selection and evolution will work to conserve its current morphology, period. It's called stabilizing selection. It's a well-known phenomenon. Even creationists accept it. So basically, what Dwayne Gish is saying here is, I think there's too much stabilizing selection on coelacanths, therefore evolution is fake. Which, one, doesn't follow. Two, he doesn't actually have evidence that there's been so little morphological change. And three, even if there were, it still wouldn't be a problem. Sorry, go ahead.
Atomic Squirrel notes, I think Dwayne here thinks that there's just one type of thing. Like the clam, the hummingbird, the frog.
Yeah, he might. In fact, you know what? I think there's a fair chance that he's about to say, why hasn't the coelacanth evolved into a tetrapod in all of this time? Which, if he does, we will answer that. But it has a whole lot to do with the fact that it's hard to crawl out of land when your basic habitat is the bottom of the deep ocean. So, just...
Something's alive in the ocean.
All right, here we go.
As a matter of fact, 400 million years ago on the evolutionary time scale. And his anatomy made him totally unsuitable to be the ancestor of the amphibian.
I actually agree. The coelacanth is not very well suited to being the ancestor of the amphibian, which is why no one thinks that coelacanths are ancestral to tetrapods.
Yeah, no one thinks that.
Yep.
It's a good thing, huh?
Mm-hmm. Like I talked about, where we have like Rhipidistia, then going to Stegocephalia, then going into, like stem tetrapods, and how Rhipidistia separated from coelacanths some like 430 million years ago. Yeah, there's a reason that no one has ever proposed, as far as I can tell, that coelacanths were the direct ancestors of tetrapods, which would be, if they were, you would just be a coelacanth, right? We wouldn't have said coelacanths went extinct. Because if they had evolved into tetrapods, then guess what? Every tetrapod would be a coelacanth. And they never would have gone extinct, just like Dinosaurs never went extinct. Ugly German Truth says, but what about Hawaii? I don't understand the question. Hawaii is a cool place, which is very expensive.
Yeah, please don't go there right now, people.
Yeah, it's not a great time to be there.
It's really not.
Now, we have something very strange here, don't we? This creature, the very close cousin of the fish that supposedly evolved an amphibian, has...
Again, very close is a little bit of a iffy statement there.
Remained the same old thing.
Right, yeah. It's about 20 million years separated from the fish that likely evolved into tetrapods. So, like, you know, that's a little quibbling.
For all of these multiplied millions of years. But his close cousin evolved not only into amphibians, but all the way up into people.
I mean, yeah, that is the basic claim.
Something seemed to be very strange here about this theory of evolution.
Okay, but Dwayne, you already showed the fish that's supposed to be morphologically representative of the ancestor of tetrapods before it began the transition to land in Eusthenopteron, which is not a coelacanth, right? And which, according to Gish himself, had limb bones that were similar to tetrapod limb bones, which is why it's supposed to have had this evolutionary history. And you didn't show, or he didn't show, a coelacanth. So he already knows this is basically a nonsense argument, right? Because he's shown us evidence that it doesn't make sense on screen in his own slides.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get that he's expecting an audience who doesn't know anything about this topic and so who just won't notice, but it bugs me the same way as Andrew Snelling showing Cenozoic fossils that he thinks are post-flood fossils as evidence that only the flood could preserve fossils like this, right? It's like, I know you know that this is bullshit, man. I know you know this.
Yeah.
So what's the deal? Do you just not care? And the answer seems to be, they just don't.
He's not expecting to be fact-checked at all.
Yeah, and it bothers me. It probably shouldn't. I should be used to it by now, right? I mean, creationists... I have a video talking about how creationists have a rocky relationship with honesty. What was it actually called? But, and I stand by that point. And I know that I should just be used to it by now. But it still bugs me, because it's just like...
I mean, this is part of why you have a Benjamin timer from Sal's, because he can't handle you calling out, his buddies for having a tenuous relationship with honesty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I call the video "Creationists Have a Bad Relationship with Honesty," and on it I put John Sanford's face stuck on a Telosian from the original series of Star Trek,
which I love.
And also 2 of his books. I put 2 of his books up there too.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, it shouldn't surprise me. It shouldn't bother me anymore, but it does. I don't know. I guess part of it is that, I mean, I basically grew up being spoon-fed this nonsense by these guys, and I trusted them because why wouldn't I, right? So maybe that's part of it. And I know that you're in a similar boat there, Shanti.
Yeah, I mean, I get the same way. I'm mad at all of the time that was taken from me by these grifters.
Yeah.
I
mean... All right, well, we'll see what he's got for us, because now he's got, like, Jurassic sea reptiles, so I'm curious as to how this connects in.
Yeah.
Now, in the past, there existed creatures called marine reptiles. Now, these...
I mean, there still exist creatures called marine reptiles.
There's still marine reptiles.
Yeah, there's this thing called a sea snake and a sea turtle, and there are even marine iguanas. But, okay. There were also other marine reptiles in the past that no longer exist. We'll give them that.
Were reptiles, but they lived in the sea. We don't have them today. At least we don't have one of them in the San Diego Zoo that I know of, or the aquarium, and until we do, I just don't believe they really do exist.
Oh, okay, so now he's open to the idea that something might be shown to exist as a result of future evidence. It's good to know that you're in that place for late surviving ichthyosaurs there, Dwayne, but like for transitional fossils that haven't been found, no, that's impossible. Like,
I'm okay with saying that maybe some dinosaurs are still around because we think that helps prove the flood.
Yeah.
But we're not okay with that trying to prove evolution. Oh, no.
Yeah, no, unacceptable.
Harumph.
Man, it's just
That's
like
so freaking frustrating, man.
be internally consistent, creationists, right? I'm not asking you to get science right, because I know that that's not likely to happen, at least for the professionals,
Yeah.
right? But just be internally consistent. Don't make arguments that contradict your other arguments. How about that?
Challenge impossible.
Seriously.
It could be proof for us, but it can't be proof for you. Neener.
Must have existed because we find their fossils scattered around the world. Here we see a fossil of a plesiosaur, one of these marine reptiles. Notice that it had paddles. Didn't have feet and legs, but it had paddles.
But also,
paddles.
Why are the paddles so
also
different?
known as fins?
Fins, yeah. But why are those fins so different from, say, the fins of sea turtles, or the fins of fish, or the fins of whales?
Hey, what's up with all those long fingy bones?
Which are
Those
really
little teeny
freaky.
tiny bits that make up long fingies.
Yeah. It's almost like evolution is true, and different groups of tetrapods and other animals have independently adapted to an aquatic lifestyle, and therefore, while they
homologous structure.
Homologous structure, but also importantly here, analogous structures in which different lineages. Yeah. So the reason that this fin doesn't look like a ray fin fish fin or a whale fin or a sea turtle fin is because while all those structures are homologous as limbs, they're analogous as fins.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the whole pattern of both homology and analogy all keeps on being consistent with evolutionary biology.
How about that?
Now, if evolution really is true, then...
Oh, we got it. We got the soundbite. Someone clip that. Dwayne Gish just said, now, evolution really is true.
we ought to have a series of intermediates showing the feet and legs of the land reptile gradually evolving into paddles as the creature made the transition from land to water.
Also known as flippers or fins.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh so hard, but...
Oh, wait. What am I...
Also, yeah, that was mega stupid. I had to provide the second key so we could launch the mega stupid that Dwayne did there.
What is the group that plesiosaurs belong to?
Bingo!
What is that? It's,
What, say again?
It's the group to which, like, plesiosaurs belong to, but it used to be a wider group in, like, the Triassic. What was it? It's got...
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what? Maybe I can find out, because we do actually have transitional forms, but Sauropterygia. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, Sauropterygia. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, let's see. Let's take a look at some of our earliest Sauropterygians, right? That's a fun idea. So let's take a look at
Jillian Wren, and you have my key, whispers Deus, and my axe.
Okay, so let's take a look at Ceresiosaurus, which is one of the oldest known Sauropterygians, which basically means that this is going to be basically exactly what Dwayne Gish is looking for in terms of transitional forms, right? So let me just pull up the other scene where you guys can see my my desktop. Hey, stop.
Get rid of the necky boy.
Okay, so let's go to just the main monitor. Okay. That looks like an animal that is quite capable of moving around on land. It's got well-formed feet. Its limbs are not stuck into paddle shapes, but it still has the long neck and some of the basic anatomical structures. Like, look at those weird little vertebrae, or not ribs. They're very much like other primitive Sauropterygians. This is clearly something that's in the Sauropterygian category. And yet,
those thingies.
Yeah, it's got pretty normal limbs that could probably get it around on land just fine. So, Dwayne, remember that time that you were like, hey, where are the transitional plesiosaurs? In museums, in museums, you could just go look. They're right there. You don't have to look very hard.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And that was me. The longest part of me finding this was remembering the word Sauropterygian.
Sauropterygian.
That was the hardest part of finding a transitional Sauropterygian between terrestrial and aquatic, was just remembering the damn word. It's almost like this idea that there's no transitional fossils has always been nonsense.
Yeah, that's just BS.
Yeah. I honestly kind of hate how absurdly easy it is to show that this argument has always been nonsense since it was first proposed.
Yeah.
When was
Yeah, that's unwelcome nuance, so.
Okay, so there was a valid question, which is when was Saurosaurus described? 1931 is the answer to that question.
Oh.
Yep.
So creationists haven't gotten there yet.
No, they're still 90 years or so behind, a little bit more than 90 years
At
behind.
least.
Yeah. So
Silver Harlow says this picture is like one syllable of a yodel.
honestly, I should probably
It's
do.
the yo.
I should do more, like add more fossils to the slideshow, which would basically just mean redoing the slideshow. But if I did, I think Saurosaurus would probably be a really good addition. And yeah, like I said, 1931, right? And I've also done things like where creationists have been denying the reptile-mammal transition, and I'm like, there are no animals with this, particular feature set. And I find that, oh yes, there are. It was described in like 1898, man. What are you talking about?
Been around for a hot minute.
Yeah, like this is not news.
Yeah.
We're going to get a little bit more Dwayne in, and then we're going to wrap things up. I do want to point out that this, while I do really like the artistic quality of this, a plesiosaur necks could not do that. They actually had very stiff necks. So
I was going to say, like I had mentioned before, this is a very necky boy, but that's a little more serpentine than I think they were usually.
To be fair, when this is an early 20th or late 19th century painting, and when that was painted, this was a reasonable hypothesis. So
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the way that we thought that T-Rex used to walk completely upright with its tail dragging the ground, and as we, learned more and found more skeletons, we were like, yeah, no, that's not how that worked at all.
Jillian Wren says, can you annotate it? So here's the thing. I don't know that I am going to make a new slideshow, but if I do, I will almost certainly do a better job of annotating what's on screen. Now, it probably won't be well enough that you could read all of it without pausing. It'll be more of those, like, if you care, pause the video, check what it is.
Freeze-frame bonus.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Also, DM verifying the mystery flesh pit wing is asking, but have you considered just lying about the fossils?
I have not considered that. That has not really ever crossed my mind that maybe I should just lie about fossils. What helps with that? It helps when your beliefs about fossil taxa are just based on evidence. Because then you don't have to lie about them.
Imagine. Right? Data over dogma.
Weird.
Weird.
Here we go.
You see, evolutionists believe the fish worked real hard to get out on land.
No, nothing.
No,
worked
they didn't,
real hard.
and no, we don't. Like what?
No fish.
You work real hard. You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go on land.
Yeah, no one is thinking that fish were like had some kind of conscious effort to go up on land. It's not how anything works.
And then these creatures worked real hard to get back into the water, and so we ought to have many, many intermediate forms, not one.
Oh my!
Well, I just showed you one. There are others that I could pick, but I just picked the one that was like the most obviously transitional between terrestrial and aquatic.
But this is a really good example of him moving goalposts. He's like, yeah, well, you should have more than one. So if you find more than one, it should be more than that. Mm-hmm. Like also, he went from saying, nah, there's no transitions to, oh, you found a transition. Well, that's just one. That's not proof of anything.
Yeah, and it's the thing that really gets me is it's like, dude, this was known since 1931. There's literally no excuse. At least with Tiktaalik, we can make the excuse like, well, it wasn't even found until after Dwayne Gish died. Hey, you know what? That's true. Yeah. At least he has an excuse for saying that this transition doesn't exist. But he doesn't have it with this. 1931, man. If you had wanted to know about it...
Yeah, he wasn't there yet.
Well, but if he had wanted to know about this, if he wanted to know the truth, he could have checked up on it. But he didn't. Because he didn't want to know...
Atomic squirrel. It says we should try answering there are no transitional fossils with, sure there are, we just don't show them to you.
They're secret. So actually, we're going to start wrapping up, but there's a little bit more I want to point out. So one of the things that gets me about this, right, is, like we said, this is a fossil that was known decades before this talk, right?
Yep.
The reason that I say things like professional creationists have a bad relationship with honesty or they don't care about the truth is that if you had wanted to know, are there transitional plesiosaurs or sauropterygians more broadly, you could find out. And then you would realize that the answer is yes. Oh, Gish died in 2013? Oh, then I guess that I think, wasn't Tiktaalik like 2005
Really? Was that late?
or something? I thought it was earlier than that. For some reason, I thought he died in like the late 90s.
Yeah, me too. Weird. Mandela effect. Just kidding.
Oh yeah, we just zapped in from an alternate universe.
Just got
guys.
Mandela affected.
Oh man,
Yep.
I wonder what happened to this universe's Dapper. Maybe he's back in my universe where Dwayne Gish died in the 90s. And he's all confused about how these people are saying about Dwayne Gish being alive in 2010. Anyway, I love how the Mandela effect is always like pointless trivia. Like, how did you spell Berenstain?
I know.
It's never like, who won this war?
Yeah, you know, it's so funny that I stumbled across people going, "Oh, the Mandela effect is real," and when they mentioned the Berenstain Bears, I was like, "What are you talking about? It's always been Berenstain." When I was a child, I read the Berenstain Bears books, and I remember as a child thinking, "Huh, that's a weird way to spell that."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they're like, "Oh, no, it was spelled a different way," and I'm like, "You guys are ridiculous. There is no Mandela effect. Your memory's just garbage."
All right. So now that we've had some excellent evidence of the fact that professional creationists have just never actually cared about the truth, because if they did, they would check, and then they just wouldn't say things like this.
Ugly German truce. Does Dwayne Gish count as a transitional form from Augustinius to Kent Hovind?
Yes. I'm going to go with yes. All right, guys. So once again, I'm going to encourage you, if you can afford it and you're interested, please do check out Bent Hovin's GoFundMe. It would really help because, like I said, Bent, I think Bent deserves our support. Not only is he a big part of this channel as my co-host on Camp with Bent, he's also the one who makes my intro and outro music. He has been very, very badly mistreated by the organization that is supposed to be there to help veterans. And if you know anything about the Veterans Affairs Office in the United States, you'll know that this is far from an unusual example.
Yeah.
Look, things happen somewhat routinely in VA facilities that if I talked about too much, I would probably lose any monetization. But let's just say it's not very uncommon for people to purposefully self-delete in VA hospitals because they cannot get any treatment.
Yeah.
That's a thing that
Being
actually
in a VA hospital is quite literally the most depressing place I have ever been inside.
Mm-hmm.
Having to take my dad there and stuff for virtual like appointments, and then the crap that my brother had to go through to get a simple pair of glasses. Just ridiculous.
Yeah. So, and look, I don't think Bent has ever asked for direct help before. I think this is the first time he's ever done a GoFundMe, as far as I know. So, if you can afford it and you would like to help Bent out, please do. In fact, until this is done, I would rather have you guys give to that than put in super chats here. Which, yeah, that's going to be a cut to my pay. I get that. But still, I think this is important.
It's for good cause.
Other than that, though, Vishanti, do you have anything coming up that you want to tell people about?
I have a couple of collabs coming up. I can't talk about them in detail yet because they're not finished. So when I'm allowed to speak more freely, I will let you know.
Okay.
They're going to be fun.
Look, I am aware of them, and I do think they will be fun. So, let's see. On the 25th, we should be having Jackson with Jackson at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Sweet.
On Thursday, I will be premiering the first video of a new series. It is about David Menton, the guy who did the Birds Aren't Dinosaurs talk. Well, this time he's doing human evolution. So this is going to be called Mendacious Menton: 3 Ways to Lie About Human Evolution, Part 104. And it is, it's coming out on Thursday.
If you're a channel member or a patron, you can watch that right now.
Actually, no, you can't anymore because now that it's scheduled for premiere.
Oh, right. Well, you can watch the other parts of the series.
Yeah. So that'll be at noon on the 27th of July, 2023, in case you're watching this in the future. And then on Saturday, the 29th, I don't know, but there's a pretty good chance it'll just be Gish with a Vish 4.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Vish, if I don't say anything about that by I don't know. Thursday, yeah, maybe remind me.
Literally last night in the middle of Apologia stream, I was like, yeah, we're still doing this tomorrow, right? Because the chat thinks that you are, and they were asking me. He's like, oh my god, I didn't do a thumbnail!
So I threw today's thumbnail together in like 20 minutes in the middle of the night.
Oh man.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Go find me on Chesh's channel in about an hour, where we're going to be doing our Unnamed Tavern current events stream, in which I will, in fact, be having some alcohol. So
You can find me in my bed because I'm about to take a nap.
that's fair. And also, as a result of that, we are not doing a Power Rangers watch party after this. So if you were hoping for that, you're going to have to pull up your own Power Rangers show and watch it on your own. All right, everybody. Bye. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Tapioca Weasel, Denny5252, Elleron Teller, Phil Rivara, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostic Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babby, Monkey They Them, Mrs. Spexinder, San, Sphincter of Doom, and the Venerable Bede. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters. And either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wish list, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.